singer who Simon described as having a voice like liquid gold.
Which, coincidentally, is also what Simon uses to wash his face. Liquid gold. It's Alice Fredenham.
Alice Fredenham stepped onto the Britain's Got Talent stage and captured the attention of millions around the world with a performance that seemed to come from another era. There was something instantly memorable about her presence. She wasn't loud, flashy, or overly confident. Instead, she appeared nervous, vulnerable, and almost overwhelmed by the moment. Yet the instant she began to sing, the entire atmosphere changed. The audience fell silent, the judges leaned forward, and viewers watching from home witnessed what would become one of the most talked-about auditions in the history of the show. Simon Cowell, a man known for being difficult to impress, described her voice as liquid gold, a compliment that immediately became associated with her name. Within days, clips of her audition spread across the internet, attracting millions of views and introducing Alice to a global audience that had never heard of her before. What made Alice's story even more remarkable was that her journey to that stage had not been easy. Before becoming a viral sensation, she had already experienced rejection on another major talent show. In 2013, she appeared on The Voice UK, hoping to showcase her talent and begin a professional music career. At 28 years old, she stepped onto the stage with hope in her heart and performed the jazz standard "The Lady Is a Tramp." It was a song that suited her style and highlighted her love for classic music. However, despite her efforts, none of the judges turned their chairs. The performance ended not with celebration but with disappointment. She left the stage carrying the painful weight of rejection, wondering whether her dream of becoming a singer might already be slipping away. For many people, that moment would have been enough to convince them to give up. Public rejection on national television is not something everyone can recover from. Yet Alice refused to let that experience define her future. Instead of abandoning her dream, she decided to try again. She quietly applied for Britain's Got Talent, determined to give herself another chance. What made this decision unusual was how secretive she was about it. She chose not to tell her family, her friends, or even her boyfriend. She carried the burden of the audition entirely on her own. Perhaps she feared another rejection and wanted to avoid disappointing the people close to her. Whatever her reasons, she walked into the competition with only herself to rely on. Behind the scenes, Alice was battling something that few viewers fully understood. She suffered from intense stage fright. This wasn't the ordinary nervousness many performers feel before stepping into the spotlight. Her anxiety could be overwhelming. Her body would shake uncontrollably. Her confidence would dissipate. Sometimes it became difficult for her to even believe in her own abilities. The fear of making a mistake or being judged by others often felt stronger than her desire to perform. Yet despite those challenges, she continued pushing forward. Music remained the one thing she could not let go of. When the day of her Britain's Got Talent audition finally arrived, her nerves were visible. She stood on stage looking fragile and uncertain. Some viewers later admitted they worried she might not be able to get through the performance. Then the music began, and everything changed. Alice chose to sing My Funny Valentine, a classic song known for its emotional depth and elegance. Her voice filled the room with a warmth and sincerity that immediately captured everyone's attention. She didn't rely on vocal tricks or dramatic theatrics. Instead, she delivered the song with honesty and emotion. Every note seemed genuine. Every lyric felt personal. The reaction was extraordinary. The judges were captivated. The audience erupted into applause. Simon Cowell's praise was particularly significant because he rarely used language as complimentary as liquid gold. Those words instantly became part of Alice's identity. Overnight, she transformed from an unknown contestant into one of the most talked-about performers in the country. Social media exploded with discussions about her audition. News outlets shared clips of her performance. Fans around the world watched and re-watched the video, fascinated by the combination of vulnerability and talent she displayed. For a brief period, it appeared that Alice was destined for stardom. Viewers saw her as a potential winner of the competition. Her unique voice, combined with her relatable personality, made her stand out from countless other contestants. Unlike many performers who projected confidence and ambition, Alice seemed almost surprised by the attention she received. That humility only made audiences love her more. People saw her as authentic, a rare quality in an entertainment industry often criticized for being artificial. However, success can create its own challenges. The sudden popularity brought enormous expectations. Every future performance would be compared to that unforgettable audition. Fans expected her to deliver the same emotional magic every time she stepped onto a stage. The pressure grew with each passing week. What viewers didn't see was how difficult that pressure became for Alice behind the scenes. Her anxiety, which had never truly disappeared, began to intensify. The more attention she received, the more overwhelming the experience became. As the competition progressed, Alice prepared for the semifinals. She rehearsed carefully, hoping to build on the success of her audition. Yet complications emerged at the worst possible moment. Reports later suggested that she was asked to change her song selection shortly before her performance. For a singer already struggling with severe stage fright, such a last-minute change was devastating. The routine she had prepared was suddenly disrupted. Her confidence began to crumble. The fear she had worked so hard to control returned with full force. When she finally stepped onto the stage for the semifinals, many viewers noticed a difference immediately. Her voice remained beautiful, but she appeared nervous and unsettled. The effortless confidence that had emerged during her audition seemed absent. She performed well, but the magic that had captivated millions during My Funny Valentine was harder to find. In a competition where every performance matters, that difference proved costly. Alice was eliminated before reaching the final stages of the show. The result shocked many fans. People who had believed she could win suddenly found themselves saying goodbye to one of the competition's most beloved contestants. Social media filled with messages of support and disappointment. Many viewers argued that she deserved another chance. Others predicted that her elimination would not matter because her future success was already guaranteed. After all, plenty of contestants had built successful careers without winning talent competitions. Alice possessed a distinctive voice and a memorable story. Surely record labels and industry professionals would recognize her potential. In the months following the show, those predictions initially appeared accurate. Industry insiders reportedly expressed interest in working with her. Discussions about recording music began to emerge. Fans eagerly waited for announcements regarding albums, tours, and television appearances. The expectation was that Alice would use the popularity generated by Britain's Got Talent as a launching pad for a major career. For a while, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Yet beneath the surface, the reality was far more complicated. Fame had arrived suddenly and unexpectedly. Alice had never seemed entirely comfortable with public attention. While many aspiring artists dream of becoming celebrities, she often appeared more interested in music itself than in the spotlight surrounding it. The demands of maintaining a public image, constantly promoting herself, and living under public scrutiny were challenges she had never anticipated. As opportunities increased, so did the pressure. Despite the obstacles, she continued trying to build a professional career. Reports indicated that Sony Music offered her a demo deal, providing an opportunity to explore recording projects and evaluate her potential as a commercial artist. For many contestants, such an offer would have represented a dream come true. It suggested that major industry figures saw something special in her talent. Alice entered the studio and began recording material, hoping this would be the beginning of a new chapter. Unfortunately, the process did not unfold as expected. Although she recorded demos and explored potential projects, the partnership failed to progress into a full recording contract. No detailed public explanation was provided, but speculation suggested that her musical style may have been difficult to market commercially. Alice's sound was deeply influenced by vintage jazz and classic standards. The mainstream music industry, however, was increasingly focused on modern pop trends. What made her unique may also have made her difficult to fit into conventional marketing strategies. For Alice, this setback was deeply painful. She had already experienced public rejection on The Voice UK. She had endured the disappointment of being eliminated from Britain's Got Talent. Now another major opportunity appeared to be slipping away. The emotional toll of these experiences began to accumulate. What had once seemed like an exciting journey toward success was becoming a series of difficult challenges that tested her confidence and resilience. As time passed, the momentum surrounding her career began to slow. Fans who had expected constant updates noticed that news about Alice became increasingly rare. Her online presence diminished. Public appearances became less frequent. Interviews grew scarce. While many performers actively seek publicity after appearing on television competitions, Alice seemed to be moving in the opposite direction. Rather than embracing the spotlight, she appeared to be retreating from it. The change was gradual enough that many people didn't notice it immediately. At first, fans assumed she was simply taking time to develop new music. Then months passed without significant announcements. The silence continued. Questions started to emerge. Where was Alice Fredenham? Why wasn't she releasing more music? Why had someone with such extraordinary potential seemingly vanished from public view? Those questions would only grow louder in the years ahead, as Alice's story took an unexpected turn that few fans could have predicted. Her rise had been remarkable, but her disappearance would prove even more mysterious. And while audiences continued replaying her unforgettable audition, the woman behind that performance was quietly beginning to step away from the world that had once celebrated her. As Alice Fredenham's public profile began to fade, many fans remained convinced that her disappearance was only temporary. After all, the music industry is filled with stories of artists who take a short break before returning stronger than ever. People assumed Alice was working quietly behind the scenes, recording songs, meeting with producers, and preparing for a proper debut. Her audition had been too powerful, her voice too distinctive, and her popularity too widespread for her to simply disappear forever. Yet as months turned into years, the silence surrounding her career became increasingly difficult to ignore. Behind the scenes, Alice was facing challenges that extended far beyond music. While the public mainly saw a talented singer with enormous potential, those who followed her story closely knew that confidence had always been one of her greatest struggles. During interviews after Britain's Got Talent, she spoke openly about the anxiety that had affected her throughout her life. Stage fright was not something she could simply overcome through determination. It was a genuine obstacle that affected her physically and emotionally. Before performances, she often experienced overwhelming nervousness. The pressure of standing before large audiences could trigger intense fear and self-doubt. For most performers, success brings confidence. The more audiences applaud, the more secure they become in their abilities. For Alice, however, success appeared to create a different problem. The larger her audience grew, the more pressure she felt to meet expectations. Every performance became a test. Every appearance brought the possibility of criticism. Every opportunity carried the risk of disappointment. Instead of feeling liberated by her growing popularity, she often seemed burdened by it. Meanwhile, the music industry itself was changing rapidly. Social media had become one of the most important tools for artists seeking to build careers. Record labels increasingly expected singers not only to create music but also to maintain an active online presence. Artists were encouraged to share personal details, post frequent updates, engage with fans daily, and constantly promote themselves across multiple platforms. For someone comfortable with publicity, this was simply part of modern entertainment. For someone like Alice, who valued privacy and struggled with anxiety, it represented a completely different challenge. The reality of the music business began to clash with her personality. She possessed the voice of a performer but not necessarily the temperament of a celebrity. While audiences wanted more access to her life, Alice seemed increasingly uncomfortable with public attention. She had never appeared interested in fame for its own sake. Her passion was music, not self-promotion. Unfortunately, the modern entertainment industry often demands both. Despite these difficulties, Alice did not completely abandon music. She continued exploring ways to pursue her passion outside the traditional industry system. Rather than relying on major labels, she began considering independent options. This approach offered certain advantages. Independent artists maintain greater creative control and avoid many of the pressures associated with large recording contracts. However, independence also comes with significant challenges, particularly financial ones. Recording, producing, and distributing music requires resources, and without label support, artists often have to find alternative ways to fund their projects. In early 2015, Alice launched a crowdfunding campaign through Kickstarter. The goal was straightforward: raise enough money to create a debut album independently. The campaign represented an important test. It would reveal whether the audience that had embraced her on television was still willing to support her years later. The target was set at £30,000, a realistic figure for a modest recording project. Success was far from guaranteed. What happened next surprised many observers. Fans responded enthusiastically. Contributions began arriving from supporters who had followed her journey since Britain's Got Talent. By the time the campaign ended, more than £40,000 had been pledged. The result demonstrated something important. Even though Alice had largely disappeared from mainstream media, she had not been forgotten. A dedicated community of listeners still believed in her talent and wanted to hear more from her. The successful campaign provided more than financial support. It offered emotional validation. After years of setbacks and uncertainty, Alice received proof that people still cared about her music. They weren't simply casual viewers who had enjoyed a television audition. They were committed supporters willing to invest their own money to help her continue pursuing her dream. For any artist, that level of loyalty is meaningful. With funding secured, work began on the album that would eventually be released under the title Under the Covers. The project reflected Alice's artistic identity perfectly. Rather than attempting to reinvent herself or chase contemporary trends, she remained faithful to the musical style that had first attracted audiences. The album consisted primarily of jazz and soul classics, songs that allowed her voice to shine while staying true to her roots. It was not a commercial gamble designed to dominate radio stations. Instead, it felt like a deeply personal statement from an artist committed to authenticity. One of the most striking aspects of Under the Covers was its refusal to follow industry expectations. Many reality television contestants spend years trying to distance themselves from the music that originally made them famous. They adopt new images, experiment with different genres, and attempt to appeal to broader audiences. Alice chose the opposite path. She embraced the vintage sound that had defined her career from the beginning. The album felt intimate, elegant, and timeless. Among those who listened to it, the reception was largely positive. Fans praised the emotional sincerity of her performances. Music bloggers and independent reviewers frequently highlighted the warmth and clarity of her voice. Many noted that she sounded exactly as audiences remembered her from television. There was no sense of artificial reinvention. Alice remained Alice. Yet critical appreciation does not always translate into commercial success. Despite the quality of the album, Under the Covers faced significant obstacles in reaching a wider audience. Without major label support, distribution proved difficult. The album was available through digital platforms and physical CD sales, but it lacked the promotional infrastructure necessary to compete in a crowded market. There were no major advertising campaigns. Few media interviews accompanied its release. Radio stations largely ignored it. As a result, the project struggled to reach listeners beyond her existing fan base. This challenge is common among independent artists. Creating great music is only one part of building a successful career. Visibility is equally important. Without marketing, even excellent albums can go unnoticed. In Alice's case, the situation was especially frustrating because she already possessed a recognizable name and a substantial fan following. Yet despite these advantages, the album never achieved the level of exposure many supporters had hoped for. For fans, the release of Under the Covers seemed like the beginning of a comeback. They imagined future albums, larger concerts, and perhaps even another breakthrough moment. After years of uncertainty, Alice appeared to be rebuilding momentum. The crowdfunding campaign had succeeded. The album had been completed. Positive reviews were appearing online. Everything suggested that new opportunities might follow. Unfortunately, those expectations would once again go unfulfilled. Following the album's release, Alice performed at a number of smaller events, including local showcases and charity concerts. These appearances allowed her to continue singing while avoiding the overwhelming pressure associated with national television. The audiences were smaller. The environments were more relaxed. For someone managing anxiety, these settings were likely far more comfortable than major concert venues or televised competitions. However, even these performances remained relatively low profile. They were rarely promoted on a large scale. Many fans only learned about them after they had already taken place. Unlike her television appearances, which attracted millions of viewers, these events often passed quietly with little media attention. While some artists thrive on constant visibility, Alice appeared content operating outside the spotlight. Yet as time passed, a familiar pattern began to emerge. Updates became less frequent. Public appearances grew increasingly rare. Social media activity slowed dramatically. Fans searching for news about upcoming projects often found nothing. Questions once again started circulating online. Was Alice working on new material? Was she planning another album? Had she decided to step away from music permanently? The uncertainty created countless theories. Some people believed she was focusing on her personal life. Others suspected that the financial realities of independent music had become too difficult to sustain. A number of fans pointed to her long-standing struggles with anxiety and suggested that the pressures of maintaining a public career may simply have become overwhelming. Without direct statements from Alice herself, no one could say for certain. What was clear, however, was that maintaining a music career required enormous effort. Independent artists must often serve as their own managers, marketers, promoters, and business strategists. For someone already battling self-doubt and performance anxiety, those responsibilities can feel exhausting. The creative side of music may bring joy, but the business side can be relentless. By 2016, signs of another withdrawal were becoming impossible to ignore. Her website gradually disappeared. Social media accounts became inactive. Communication with fans diminished almost completely. Once again, there were no dramatic announcements, no farewell messages, and no public explanations. Alice simply stepped back from visibility in the same quiet manner that had characterized much of her career. For supporters who had contributed to her crowdfunding campaign and celebrated the release of Under the Covers, the silence was disappointing. Many had hoped the album would mark the beginning of a long and successful independent career. Instead, it increasingly appeared to be one of her final major projects. The possibility that Alice might be leaving music behind altogether began to feel more realistic. Still, fans refused to give up hope completely. The internet ensured that her performances remained accessible. Millions of people continued discovering her Britain's Got Talent audition for the first time. New comments appeared beneath old videos every day. Viewers from around the world shared stories about how her voice had affected them. Even in her absence, Alice's music continued reaching new audiences. And because of that enduring interest, one question never disappeared. Where was Alice Fredenham now? For years, nobody seemed to have a clear answer. But eventually, new information would emerge, information that would finally reveal what had happened to the singer whose voice had once been described as liquid gold. For years after Alice Fredenham stepped away from public life, fans continued searching for answers. Her story was unusual because there had been no dramatic scandal, public controversy, or career-ending mistake. Instead, she seemed to fade away quietly, leaving behind only memories of a remarkable audition and a brief but memorable music career. In an age when celebrities constantly share details of their lives online, Alice's disappearance felt almost mysterious. The internet was filled with questions about her whereabouts, but very few concrete answers existed. As time passed, the few traces of her career remained scattered across the digital world. Videos of her Britain's Got Talent audition continued attracting viewers. Her performances were shared on social media and discussed in fan communities. New audiences discovered her voice every year, often assuming she must still be recording music somewhere. Yet when they searched for recent updates, they found very little. There were no new songs, no active social media profiles, and no public appearances to follow. By the early 2020s, curiosity surrounding Alice had reached a new level. Many fans who had followed her journey since 2013 wondered whether she had completely abandoned music or was simply living a more private life. Because she had never formally announced her retirement, speculation continued. Some believed she was working on projects behind the scenes. Others thought she might eventually return to performing when the timing felt right. Hope remained alive largely because Alice herself had never publicly closed the door on a future comeback. Then, in 2023, new information finally emerged. A local publication known as the Hertz Advertiser attempted to contact Alice for an update on her life and career. Journalists reached out through available channels, hoping to learn what had happened to one of the region's most recognizable musical talents. However, their efforts were unsuccessful. Emails went unanswered. Messages received no response. There were no representatives available to speak on her behalf. For many fans, this was the first indication of just how completely she had withdrawn from public life. The article served as an important reminder that Alice's absence was not simply a temporary break. Even local media organizations that had covered her rise to fame were unable to establish contact. The silence that had surrounded her for years appeared to be intentional. She was not promoting new projects. She was not preparing for a return to television. She was not maintaining even a limited public profile. Instead, she seemed committed to living entirely outside the spotlight. Around the same time, another important detail surfaced. Cherry Red Records, the independent label associated with distributing her album, was contacted for comment regarding her current status. Their response was brief but significant. According to reports, The label stated that Alice had retired from the music industry and wished to maintain her privacy. While the statement provided no detailed explanation, it delivered something fans had lacked for years: clarity. For many supporters, the confirmation was bittersweet. On one hand, it finally answered a question that had lingered for nearly a decade. Alice had indeed stepped away from the music industry. On the other hand, it suggested that the comeback many people had hoped for was unlikely. The word retired carried weight. It implied a deliberate decision rather than a temporary absence. For fans who had spent years waiting for another album or performance, the news was difficult to accept. Yet the statement also reflected something important about Alice's personality. Throughout her career, she had never seemed motivated by fame itself. While many performers actively seek attention and recognition, Alice often appeared uncomfortable with public exposure. Her greatest strengths as an artist were her sincerity and vulnerability. Those same qualities may have made the demands of celebrity life particularly difficult for her to handle. Looking back on her journey, it becomes easier to understand why she might have chosen a different path. From the beginning, she struggled with severe stage fright. The pressure of performing in front of millions of viewers was immense. Even after receiving praise from Simon Cowell and becoming an international viral sensation, the anxiety never fully disappeared. Success brought opportunities, but it also brought expectations. Every performance was scrutinized. Every decision was discussed. Every mistake risked becoming public. For some artists, that environment is exciting. For others, it can be exhausting. The constant pressure to remain visible, relevant, and successful takes a toll on even the most confident performers. Alice entered the spotlight unexpectedly and achieved fame almost overnight. Unlike artists who spend years gradually building careers, she experienced a sudden explosion of attention that few people could have anticipated or prepared for. Mental health experts often note that rapid fame can be overwhelming, particularly for individuals who already struggle with anxiety. The transition from ordinary life to public recognition can create intense stress. Privacy becomes difficult to maintain. Criticism becomes impossible to avoid. Personal insecurities can become magnified under constant public observation. While Alice never publicly detailed all of her experiences, many fans believe these factors likely played a significant role in her decision to step away. Despite her retirement, interest in Alice has never completely disappeared. Online forums continue discussing her performances. Comment sections beneath her audition videos remain active years after they were first uploaded. Viewers regularly describe how her voice moved them emotionally. Some share stories about discovering her music during difficult periods in their lives. Others simply express gratitude for the beauty she brought to a few unforgettable performances. One reason her story continues to resonate is because it challenges traditional ideas about success. In popular culture, success is often measured through awards, chart positions, sold-out concerts, and years of public visibility. Alice's career followed a different path. She may not have become a global superstar, but she created moments that people still remember more than a decade later. Millions of viewers continue returning to her performances because they feel authentic. In an industry often criticized for manufactured personalities, Alice seemed genuinely herself. Over the years, various rumors have circulated among fans regarding her private life. One frequently repeated story involves an anonymous admirer who allegedly sent her flowers as a gesture of appreciation. According to the story, the admirer later received a handwritten thank you note in return. While the account has never been independently verified, many fans enjoy sharing it because it aligns with the image they have of Alice: gracious, humble, and appreciative of those who supported her career. Whether the story is true or not, it highlights an important point. Even though Alice disappeared from public view, people continue to feel connected to her. Her influence did not disappear when she stopped performing. The emotional impact of her music remains. In many ways, that may be one of the most meaningful achievements any artist can hope for. Today, searching for Alice Fredenham primarily leads to archive footage, old interviews, fan discussions, and recordings from a brief time in the spotlight. There's no active website, no official social media presence, no promotional campaigns, no announcements regarding future projects. The woman who once captivated millions with a single song has chosen a life of privacy instead. Will she ever return to music? The honest answer is that nobody knows. There's no public evidence suggesting that she plans to release new material or perform again. The available information points toward retirement and a desire to remain out of the spotlight. At the same time, music has a way of staying with people. Many artists who leave the industry eventually find themselves drawn back to it in some form, whether through recording, songwriting, or occasional performances. For now, however, Alice's legacy rests on the work she has already shared. Her unforgettable audition remains one of the most beloved moments in Britain's Got Talent history. Her album Under the Covers continues to be appreciated by dedicated fans. Most importantly, her voice remains preserved through recordings that allow new generations of listeners to discover her talent. Perhaps that is the most fitting conclusion to her story. Not every artist measures success through fame or fortune. Some leave their mark through a handful of genuine moments that continue touching people long after the spotlight fades. Alice Fredenham may have stepped away from the music industry, but the performances she left behind continue to speak for her. Years after she first sang My Funny Valentine, people are still listening, still remembering, and still wondering what might have been.